What My Bones Know. A Memoir of Healing from Complex Trauma by Stephanie Foo. Introduction. Imagine a young woman, only 16 years old, standing over her sleeping father. In her hands, she holds the cold, heavy weight of an axe. Her mind is a tempest of fear and rage, and in that terrible moment, she is screaming. How does a child arrive at such a desperate place? What series of events could possibly lead to a scene of such heartbreak and terror? This isn't the opening of a thriller novel. It's a true and devastating moment from the life of Stephanie Foo, a successful radio producer who, from the outside, seemed to have it all. She had a dream job at one of the world's most popular radio shows, a loving partner, and a life in the vibrant heart of New York City. Yet, beneath this glittering surface, a hidden storm was raging. For as long as she could remember, she was haunted by a feeling she called the dread, a constant, crushing anxiety and a deep-seated belief that she was fundamentally broken. After years of therapy that never seemed to get to the root of the problem, a single diagnosis changed everything: complex post-traumatic stress disorder, or C-PTSD. This wasn't the PTSD we often hear about, linked to a single, terrible event. This was something deeper, something woven into the very fabric of her being by years of childhood abuse and neglect. In her achingly beautiful and courageous memoir, What My Bones Know, Stephanie Foo takes us on a journey into the heart of this diagnosis. It is a story of unraveling a painful past, of grappling with the science of how trauma physically reshapes our brains and bodies, and ultimately, of a relentless search for healing. Today, we're going to walk that path with her, and I promise you, by the end of our time together, you will not only understand the hidden world of complex trauma, but you will also discover a profound and powerful truth about the resilience of the human spirit. You will learn that healing is not about erasing our scars, but about learning to see the strength and even the beauty within them. This isn't just Stephanie's story. It's a story that holds a lesson for anyone who has ever felt like they were fighting a battle no one else could see. Book summary. Our story begins not in a war zone, but in the quiet, sterile offices of a New York media company. Stephanie Foo is at the peak of her career. She's a producer for the acclaimed radio show This American Life, a job she had dreamed of since she was a teenager. She has friends, a loving boyfriend named Joey, and a life filled with parties and professional accolades. By all measures, she is a success story, a shining example of resilience. But inside, it's a different story. Almost every morning, Stephanie sits at her desk and cries, overwhelmed by the dread. It's a shapeless, constant anxiety. A feeling that something is about to go terribly wrong and that it will all be her fault. This dread has been her shadow for as long as she can remember. It poisons her relationships, making her needy and insecure. It fuels a ferocious, punishing work ethic, because achievement is the only thing that temporarily quiets the voice in her head telling her she's not good enough. For 8 years, she's been talking to a therapist, Samantha, trying to manage what she believes are ordinary bouts of depression and anxiety. But as she turns 30, she notices her friends are settling into a calm adulthood, while her own internal chaos only seems to grow louder. Desperate for an answer, she asks her therapist if she might be bipolar. Samantha laughs. She then casually asks a question that shatters Stephanie's world. Do you want to know your diagnosis? After nearly a decade of therapy, Stephanie finally hears the words, "You have complex PTSD from your childhood." Not just PTSD. Complex PTSD. Her therapist explains that traditional PTSD is often tied to a single traumatic event, like a car crash or a tour in a war zone. But C-PTSD comes from prolonged, repeated trauma over many years, where there is no chance of escape. The most common cause? Child abuse. The session ends, and Stephanie turns to the internet. What she finds is not a medical document, but a biography of her life. The symptoms read like a list of her deepest, most hidden shames: difficulty controlling emotions, a tendency to trust the wrong people, dismal self-loathing, trouble maintaining relationships. Every part of her personality, her passions, her fears, the way she speaks, suddenly seems not like a unique identity she has built, but like a symptom of a disease. She is, in her own words, a textbook case of mental illness. The diagnosis is both a relief and a devastation. It explains everything, but it also feels like a life sentence. She realizes that her career, her achievements, Her entire life in New York have been an attempt to outrun a past that is literally encoded in her body. That day, she recognizes that running isn't working. She has to turn around and face the ghosts she's been fleeing her whole life. And to do that, she must go back to the beginning. To understand her trauma, Stephanie needs to fact-check her own memories. She digs out 4 old family VCR tapes, the last surviving relics of her childhood. What she sees is a happy little girl with a British accent, opening Christmas presents, chasing bubbles on the lawn with a smiling, carefree mother. It's a life she barely recognizes. This isn't how it was, she thinks. This isn't the full story. The full story is one her family tried to bury. They came to America from Malaysia to thrive. Her father was a brilliant man who scored a perfect 1,600 on his SATs, earning a full scholarship to a prestigious university in California. They moved into a beautiful home in San Jose, the heart of Silicon Valley. They were living the immigrant dream. But behind the closed doors of that beautiful home, a different reality was unfolding. Stephanie's childhood was a masterclass in walking on eggshells. Her mother, a woman who was charming and beloved in public, was a tyrant in private. Every aspect of Stephanie's life was meticulously controlled, from her weekend activities to the way she wrote in her journal. One of the most heartbreaking examples is the journal itself. Her mother forced her to write entries about their family outings, not to preserve fond memories, but as a writing exercise. After 6-year-old Stephanie proudly finishes an entry about a trip to the Santa Cruz Beach boardwalk, her mother takes out a red pen and covers the page in fierce corrections. The grade at the top is a C-. Then comes the punishment, a sharp crack of a plastic ruler across her open palm. Today, Stephanie has no memory of the boardwalk, the rides, or the fun. The only thing she remembers vividly is the sting of that ruler. This was the rhythm of her childhood. The whippings were constant, for infractions as minor as using American slang or sitting with one leg up on a chair. Her mother would use her hands, chopsticks, a bamboo cane, even a tennis racket, often screaming that Stephanie had ruined her life, that she was stupid, ugly, and unwanted. These beatings were horrifying, but it was the words that destroyed her. A few times a year, the rage would escalate into something even more terrifying. Her mother would hold a cleaver to her neck or threaten to throw her down the stairs, trapping her in a senseless loop of terror for hours. And after the most vicious beatings, her mother would threaten suicide, blaming Stephanie for her misery. Stephanie would sit outside her mother's locked bedroom door, her ear pressed against the wood, trying to decide at what point she should call for help, knowing her mother had threatened to kill her if she did. Her father was a ghost in this household. The ambitious man who had pulled his family out of poverty was gone, replaced by a shell of a man who escaped into his work and the golf course. He was a phantom who offered no protection. When his wife's moods exploded, he would blame Stephanie, asking, "Why can't you just be better?" To survive this, young Stephanie became the family mediator. She tried to keep the peace, absorbing her mother's rage and shielding her father from it, constructing lies that it was her own bad behavior causing the turmoil. She pushed herself to be perfect, hoping that straight A's and flawless performances could somehow fix the brokenness in her home. Her only escape was the internet. Late at night, after her parents were asleep, she would sneak onto the family computer and connect with friends in online chat rooms. It was her only refuge. One night, she discovered her father had been looking at inappropriate images online. Terrified that her mother would find out and it would destroy their already fragile family, Stephanie secretly changed the parental controls on their AOL account. A few days later, her mother stormed into her room, screaming that all their money was gone because she couldn't access their online bank account. The punishment that followed was the most brutal Stephanie had ever endured. For the first time, both of her parents turned on her. Her father, a man who rarely hit her, threw her across the room, against the wall, against a heavy bookshelf, threatening to tip it over and crush her. The beating ended with him grabbing his golf driver, its head bigger and harder than his fist, screaming for the password as he swung it down toward her head. She rolled out of the way just in time, the club splintering an ottoman where she had just been. That night, she gave them the password, and before she went to bed, she slipped a knife under her pillow. When Stephanie was 13, her mother finally left. She told Stephanie she was divorcing her father and drove away. For 2 months, she was gone. When she finally returned, it was not with an apology or a hug, but with a torrent of rage over a dirty litter box. In that moment, something inside Stephanie closed off to her mother forever. She chose to live with her father. Her mother's last words to her were, "You'll regret this." Life with just her father was a new kind of chaos. He was lost in his own depression, and Stephanie became his caretaker, his parent. She managed his life, his emotions, and his social calendar. But this strange, shared adolescence of theirs was built on a foundation of shared hatred for her mother. Over dinner, they would trade stories of her cruelty, calling her a bitch and a whore. Hatred, Stephanie learned, was the antidote to sadness. It was pure power. This rage spilled over into her school life. She became a tiny, foul-mouthed pirate, getting into fights, alienating her classmates, and leaning into the rumors that she was a witch, a drug dealer, a monster. Soon, the simmering hatred she and her father shared had nowhere to go but toward each other. The first time he told her she was just like her mother, she screamed at him, "I am nothing like her." The fights escalated. He began using his car as a weapon, speeding through stop signs, swerving into oncoming traffic, laughing maniacally and singing, "It's time for both of us to die." One sunny afternoon, after another terrifying episode in the car, Stephanie had had enough. She jumped out at a red light and walked home. That night, she found an old, rusty axe in the yard. As her father slept, she stood over his bed, heaved the axe above his head, and screamed. "How do you like it?" she said, her voice chillingly calm. "How does it feel to be on the other side of things?" She made him promise never to threaten her life again. A few months later, her father left, too. At 16, Stephanie was living alone in a large, empty house in the middle of nowhere. Her father would drop by to leave food, but he mostly left her to fend for herself. She was abandoned, again. She subsisted on shoplifted microwave dinners and filled journals with suicide notes. She was only saved by two things: her best friends and journalism. Joining the school newspaper gave her a purpose. It was a puzzle she could solve. She could take the chaos and injustice of the world and shape it into something controlled, something meaningful. It was journalism that got her into college, despite a miserable GPA. It was journalism that got her to her high school graduation, an event her father didn't attend. As she stood there, diploma in hand, she realized she had survived. She had gotten herself there with her own hard work. This drive became her salvation. She threw herself into her career, graduating from college in just 2.5 years. She was brilliant, but she was also angry. She saw herself as a sword, swinging blindly at the world. She pushed people away, most notably a close friend who was diagnosed with cancer. Stephanie, lost in her own pain, failed to be there for her. She was later told, "The real cancer is pictured sitting next to me." The pile of abandonments grew, and she realized the common denominator was her. She was the problem. At 22, she made a conscious decision to change. She embarked on an act of radical forgiveness, letting go of the anger that had been her shield for so long. She started seeing her therapist, Samantha, and slowly, painstakingly, learned the basics of healthy communication. She punched down her anger like a ball of dough, flattening it out until it became a reflex to float away from conflict. And it worked. She built a community of loving friends. She landed a job at Snap Judgment and then, her dream job at This American Life. She was, by every external measure, a picture of resilience. The world loves a happy ending, and Stephanie had written one for herself. She was all better now. Or so she thought. This brings us back to where our story started. Despite her success, the dread never truly left. It was a constant hum beneath the surface, swelling into a terrible roar during moments of stress or self-doubt. It sabotaged her romantic relationships and fueled her workaholism. The move to New York and the high-pressure environment at This American Life only made it worse. A particularly difficult boss seemed to single her out, undermining her confidence and leaving her feeling incompetent and isolated. After years of this, her carefully constructed world began to crumble. Her anxiety reached a fever pitch. She was crying on the subway every day. The work that had once been her salvation now felt like a prison. One day, after her boss berated her for a tiny, insignificant mistake, the tsunami of rage she had suppressed for years finally broke through. She quit. Though she was later convinced to return, the illusion was shattered. Work was not the cure. A few days later, on a call with Samantha, she got her diagnosis. And with it, a new, terrifying question. If her entire personality was just a collection of symptoms, what part of her was actually her? This is where Stephanie's true journey begins. She quits her dream job, telling her boss, "Healing needs to be my job now." And like a good journalist, she starts with research. She learns that C-PTSD doesn't officially exist in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, the DSM, which is why so few therapists are trained to treat it. The literature she does find is grim, describing people with C-PTSD as a burden to themselves and others. This sends her into a spiral of shame. But her research also reveals the profound biological impact of her childhood. She learns about the ACE score, or Adverse Childhood Experiences score. It's a questionnaire that measures childhood trauma. The results are stark. The more trauma someone suffers, the worse their health outcomes are in adulthood. People with high ACE scores are more likely to develop cancer, heart disease, and depression. A score of 6 or higher, she reads, can take 20 years off your life expectancy. Stephanie's score is a 6. She learns that trauma literally changes the brain. In traumatized brains, the amygdala, the fear center, is enlarged. Other parts, responsible for self-awareness, emotional regulation, and logical reasoning, are shrunken. Her trauma, she realizes, is not just a memory. It's a physical reality etched into her brain and her DNA. She learns about epigenetics, how trauma can actually change the chemical markers on our genes and pass that trauma down through generations. Her family tried to erase their history of war, poverty, and migration, but her body remembered. This knowledge is both terrifying and, in a strange way, liberating. It's not all in her head. Her pain is real, quantifiable, scientific, but it also feels like a deterministic prison. If her brain is programmed by trauma, how can she ever change? This is the central question she sets out to answer. Her first step is to try and hack her own brain. She adopts a strict regimen of healthy eating, exercise, and 8 hours of sleep. It helps with her physical energy, but the psychic pain remains. She knows she needs a therapist, but the search is a nightmare of bureaucratic red tape and bad matches. She finally tries a form of therapy called EMDR, or eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. It's a strange process where a patient revisits past traumas while moving their eyes back and forth, or holding vibrating buzzers in their hands. Her therapist, Eleanor, asks her to recall a disturbing memory. But Stephanie finds that when she thinks about the most violent moments of her childhood, the golf club, the knives, she feels nothing. A 2 out of 10, maybe. She realizes she's profoundly dissociated from her own pain. To break through this wall, she decides to re-trigger herself. She downloads the movie Mommy Dearest, a film whose depiction of child abuse so closely mirrored her own that it had terrified her as a teenager. In her next EMDR session, with the buzzers in her hands, she revisits the memory of being beaten with a wire hanger. This time, the memory is more vivid than ever before. She hears her mother's screaming voice, sees the red welts forming on her child self's legs. For the first time, she doesn't just know that the abuse wasn't her fault. She feels it, like a blade through flesh. She is overwhelmed with love and adoration for her childhood self, for the courageous little girl who endured so much. And in that session, she unearths a second, shattering truth. Her parents didn't love her, not because she was unlovable, but because they were so buried in their own misery that they were incapable of it. It's a tragic realization, but instead of breaking her, it sets her free. The healing, however, is not a straight line. Just as she starts to feel better, she'll be ambushed by her old patterns. After a weekend where she feels slightly left out by her best friend and her fiancé, she spirals into a familiar rage and self-loathing. It takes her hours to figure out why she's upset. She realizes her dissociation is like a veil, hiding her true emotions from herself. The dread is just a colorless amalgamation of feelings she doesn't have the tools to name. So she begins the work of learning to feel. She tries everything: acupuncture, breathwork, a trauma support group. But she finds herself approaching wellness with the same obsessive perfectionism she brought to her job. She's stressing out about not being perfect at her relaxation classes. She finds a breakthrough in an unexpected place: a yin/restorative candlelit yoga class. The instructor's constant guidance forces her to focus intensely on the physical sensations in her body. For the first time, her racing mind goes quiet. She learns about the default mode network, or DMN, the part of our brain that's active when we ruminate about the past or worry about the future. For people with C-PTSD, this network is often overactive. Mindfulness, focusing intently on the present moment, is the most effective way to quiet it. She discovers she can short-circuit her anxiety by counting colors in the room or by mindfully eating a chicken wrap. She even revisits psychedelics. A psilocybin mushroom trip in the Brooklyn Botanic Garden helps her break through her C-PTSD's void of self-hatred. For years, her friends had offered her love and compliments, but they were like crumbs falling into a black hole. Under the influence of the mushrooms, she finally allows herself to absorb their kindness, to believe she is worthy of it. This experience inspires her to start a gratitude journal, a practice she had once scoffed at. By systematically noting the good things in her life, she slowly retrains her brain to see the world differently. But these tools are palliative care, not a cure. They help manage the symptoms, but the source of the trauma remains. To truly heal, she needs to go deeper. Before she can move forward, she has to go back one more time, to the place where it all began. San Jose. The trip is a shock. The rolling hills she remembered as a banal, sleepy landscape are actually riotously beautiful, craggy mountains full of life. She realizes with a devastating clarity that her trauma had blinded her to the beauty of her own home. She had thrown out all the good memories along with the bad. This throws her into a crisis of confidence. If she could misremember something so fundamental, can she trust any of her memories? Was the communal trauma she remembered among her immigrant classmates real, or had she projected her own experience onto everyone else? Her old high school teachers tell her the student's main problem is simply academic stress. They paint a picture of a privileged, high-achieving community. For a moment, Stephanie believes them. Maybe she was just making mountains out of molehills. But a conversation with an old classmate, Steve, shatters that illusion. Of course the teachers don't know. He says, yes, we were all getting our asses beat. The final confirmation comes from the school's social worker, Yvonne, who tells her that physical abuse, sexual assault, incest, and self-harm are rampant among the students. The model minority myth, she says, makes this trauma invisible. The community is not a paragon of immigrant success. It's a community of survivors, passing down their unhealed wounds from one generation to the next. This validation is crucial. Stephanie is not crazy. Her pain is real, and it is shared. This leads her to explore the silence in her own family. Her great-auntie, the family matriarch, finally reveals a long-held secret. The reason Stephanie was treated as the favorite child during their visits to Malaysia wasn't because she was special. It was because the entire family knew about the abuse. Everybody also seen, Auntie tells her. They showered her with love and praise not because she earned it, but as an act of protection, an attempt to counterbalance her mother's cruelty. It was a grand, coordinated performance of love. This revelation, however, is complicated. While it was an act of love, it was also an act of deception, part of a long family history of keeping secrets. Stephanie learns about her mother being adopted, about a half-sister she never knew she had, and that her father remarried years before he ever told her. The past, she realizes, is never the past. This brings her to her final, most transformative therapeutic relationship. After a frustrating search, she finds Dr. Jacob Ham, a psychologist at Mount Sinai who specializes in relational trauma. Their therapy is unconventional. They record their sessions, and afterward, they analyze the transcript together in a shared Google Doc, like two editors collaborating on a story. Dr. Ham teaches her that C-PTSD is fundamentally a relational trauma, caused by bad relationships, and can only be healed through practicing good relationships. His office becomes a safe place for her to duel, to practice listening, asking for what she needs, and repairing the small ruptures in communication that happen between them. He teaches her that punishment doesn't work. For her whole life, she believed that shame and self-punishment were the only ways to become a better person. But watching a recorded session of Dr. Ham with another family, she sees a father break through to his estranged daughter not through guilt, but through love and forgiveness. Punishment, she realizes, is the opposite of love. Dr. Ham gives her permission to feel all of her emotions, even the negative ones. He teaches her the difference between pain and suffering. Pain is the appropriate hurt you feel when something bad happens. Suffering is the extra layer of shame you add on top. Feeling bad about feeling bad. Healing isn't about feeling nothing. It's about feeling the appropriate emotions at the appropriate times and being able to come back to yourself. This permission widens her world. The narrow, treacherous corridor of her mind, walled in by her mother's rules, begins to open up. She allows herself to be sad, to be tired, to eat the cookie. And the world doesn't collapse. The culmination of this journey is her wedding to Joey. She had invited her extended family, but not her parents. The day is a celebration not just of their love, but of the community that raised her, the friends who kept her alive. During the ceremony, she and Joey give a personal, handwritten letter to every single guest, thanking them for being in their lives. As she looks out at the sea of tear-streaked faces, the void of loneliness she has carried her whole life is, for once, full. It is overflowing. She realizes the story her PTSD told her, that she was unlovable, toxic, and alone, was a lie. The truth is, she has given and received a lifetime of love. The book's final, powerful revelation comes during the 2020 pandemic. As the world melts down, Stephanie finds herself calm, productive, and clear-headed. She realizes that her PTSD, a condition that felt like a disability in times of peace, has transformed into a superpower in a time of crisis. Her hypervigilance is now just vigilance. Her ability to dissociate in moments of extreme stress allows her to become hyper-rational and focused while others are panicking. A neuroscientist she interviews even has an acronym for this phenomenon: BADAS, for Blunted and Discordant Affect Sensitivity Syndrome. She realizes that her C-PTSD, with all its challenges, has also given her gifts: a profound capacity for empathy, an attunement to the needs of others, and an unshakable strength. She is not broken. She is, and always has been, a fucking wonder. Commentary. What My Bones Know is more than just a memoir. It's a vital and deeply generous act of translation. Stephanie Foo takes the painful, often isolating language of trauma and translates it into a story of hope, resilience, and profound humanity. What strikes me most about this book is its relentless honesty. There are no easy answers here. Healing, as Stephanie shows us, is not a destination you arrive at one day, but a lifelong process. It's messy, it's frustrating, and it's filled with setbacks, but it is also possible. She demolishes the myth that we are prisoners of our past. Instead, she offers a new narrative, that our past, no matter how painful, can become a source of incredible strength and wisdom. The book is a powerful argument against silence. Stephanie's family, like so many others, believed that burying the past was a form of protection. But what she so bravely reveals is that secrets don't heal wounds. They only allow them to fester in the dark. By bringing her own story into the light, she gives us all permission to do the same. She shows us that our pain does not have to be a source of shame. It can be a bridge to connection, to empathy, and to a deeper understanding of ourselves and each other. For anyone who has ever felt that nagging dread, that sense of being fundamentally different or broken, this book is a lifeline. It's a scientific investigation, a personal reckoning, and a love story all rolled into one. It teaches us that our brains and bodies are wired for survival, and that even our most challenging symptoms are often just our deepest instincts trying to protect us. The rage, the anxiety, the hypervigilance, these are not signs of weakness, but evidence of what we have survived. So, what can we take from this incredible journey? There are so many lessons, but here are a few simple ideas you can carry with you today. First, practice curiosity over judgment. The next time you feel that familiar sting of self-criticism, try to get curious instead. Ask yourself, as Dr. Ham taught Stephanie, what is this feeling trying to teach me? Treat your emotions not as enemies to be silenced, but as wise messengers. Second, remember the power of grounding. When you feel overwhelmed, you don't need a complicated meditation practice. Just bring yourself back to the present moment. Try the simple technique of counting colors. Find 5 red things in the room, then 5 blue things, then 5 green things. It's a surprisingly powerful way to quiet the noise in your head and remind your body that, right here and now, you are safe. And finally, start looking for the evidence of love. The story our anxiety tells us is often one of lack and loneliness. But if you look closely, you'll find that your life, like Stephanie's, is filled with countless small acts of kindness. A text from a friend, a smile from a stranger, a moment of connection. Start a practice of noticing them. Write them down. Because gratitude, as Stephanie discovered, is the flame that fills the void. That was a summary of What My Bones Know, by Stephanie Foo. We've walked through the major landmarks of her journey today, but I'll be honest with you, a summary is like looking at a map of a beautiful country. It can show you the layout, but it can never replace the experience of actually walking the paths, breathing the air, and feeling the sun on your face. The real magic of this book happens in the quiet moments of reading, when a particular story or a simple phrase connects with you in a way you didn't expect. This summary is here to help you see if this is a journey worth taking. If anything we've talked about has sparked something in you, I encourage you to pick up a copy. Reading it isn't just about learning. It's an experience that can genuinely change the way you understand yourself and the world around you. You can find a link to the book in the description below. Also, if you found this summary valuable, please take a moment to hit that like button and subscribe to Billionaire's Bookshelf. It tells us that these journeys matter, and it ensures you won't miss our next exploration into another life-changing book. Let's keep growing and learning together.